Welcome back to another episode of Sounds Like a Drum. On our last episode, we provided an overview of the different factors involved in choosing the perfect snare drum head for the sound that you're looking for. In this episode, we'll be covering the design elements and features of different types of drum heads and how they affect the sound that you'll be achieving with them. Drumheads are relatively simple in design, but the intricacies of each of the individual elements are really what provide the functionality that we're used to when it comes to tuning up drumheads. Typically, you'll have a metal ring around the outside of the drum head that actually holds the film in, and this is often referred to as the flesh hoop. And that's because traditionally, with natural calfskin drum heads, this would actually be the hoop that the calfskin would be tucked underneath and around. And so this is actually the hoop that the drum hoop comes in contact with when it comes time to mount it on the shell and tune it up. Just above the hoop itself is the collar, and the collar is this curvature. It's that rounded over edge in the material that you're playing on that actually conforms around the bearing edge or the apex of the drum shell. And of course, there's the surface of the drum head, the area that you're actually playing on, whether it be with a stick or brush or any other implement. This is often referred to as film, as it is polyester film or a plastic, a synthetic that's being used as a substitute to traditional natural animal hide. Now, every company has their own approach to each of these three elements, both the flesh hoop, the collar design, and of course the material being used for the drumhead surface. Most often you'll find that regardless of the manufacturer, the hoop features some variation on kind of a U-channel. In this case, often aluminum that's being used that may have a crimp on the outside, it may have a rollover edge as is common with Evans Drumheads, or it may have an actual extrusion with little teeth that hold down on the glue that's applied into that channel as well as the film itself to prevent any kind of pull out of the material from the hoop. While all of the hoops in the Evans Drumheads line, with the exception of their marching drum heads, are consistent in their U-channel design, with Remo and Aquarian, they both offer vintage variations for some of their drum heads that actually have a larger inner diameter, or the area between the inside edge on this side and the opposite edge here, in order to conform around traditionally oversized drum shells. Because it's quite common to find vintage drums that are oversized, most popularly Gretsch Round Badge, some of the Ludwig drums, anything really with a sparkle wrap. Oftentimes that was overlapped and the sparkle wraps were a little bit thicker, and so they provided a larger outer diameter for the shell, which makes it more difficult to fit modern drum heads on. Both Remo and Aquarian offer vintage variations on several of their drum heads. With Remo, it's their classic fit models, and with Aquarian, it's their vintage series, both of which feature a different hoop that has a different inner diameter in order to conform to that larger outer diameter of the shell. Now, Evans takes a slightly different approach on this. Instead of modifying the hoop itself, they changed the collar. Full disclosure, I was actually involved with the development and launch of Level 360, which is the collar design that Evans developed in order to provide a different fit for all of their drum heads, not just specific lines, but the entire offering of their drum heads, in order to be able to fit not just vintage drums, but even modern drums a little bit better by having greater surface area for this horizontal plane here in order to come in contact directly with that apex of the shell, the bearing edge. This is something that Aquarian had addressed to a certain degree early on in time, but Evans actually pulled their collar back even more, making it even steeper in order to fit a wider variety of shell designs and allow for more horizontal playing surface to actually sit right on top of the apex of that shell or the bearing edge. What this tends to offer in terms of the tunability and the user experience overall is, first of all, the seating process is a lot easier. You don't have to go through quite so many steps. It doesn't take as long to get the drum head seated, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that there isn't any extra material that's sitting on the top side of the bearing edge of the shell. That head won't rock back and forth. If you take other drum heads, sometimes you'll find that depending on the drum shell design, they might not fit perfectly. And so the collar design that Evans used specifically offers a better fit across all different types of drums, whether they're vintage or modern, and allows for a much easier tuning experience overall. Now, early on, Aquarian developed their sound curve collar, which is their variation on the collar design in order to provide a similar experience to what you now receive with the Evans Level 360 collar. Evans took that concept and was able to push it a little bit further and create something that was even more all-encompassing. And of course, the surface. The polyester material that's used to create all the different variations in drum heads. Every company has a different source when it comes to the plastic material that they're using. There's some overlap. There are certain films that are being used by multiple manufacturers in order to create different lines within their respective brands. But then there's also a lot of unique material that's being used. And this is really what causes the greatest difference in the performance of drum heads overall. When you go from one line to another line, the variable that is most often changed is the actual surface material of the drum head. Not surprisingly, this episode ran a little bit long. So we'll be releasing part 2 later on this week. If you're watching in real time, make sure that you're subscribed and that you've turned on notifications via the link right up here so that you'll know when part 2 is released. If you're watching after part 2 has already been released, then the link is right here. Like right here. Like all you have to do is click that thing right there and you'll be taken to part 2. It's that simple. Just click on it right there.